This is The KJ Show. The KJ Show with host Dr. Katherine Johnson is a mix of breaking news and practical advice on the many ways in which the energy industry can affect you and your family. Katherine will combine energy updates and conversations with leaders in the energy efficiency community. So please welcome your host, Dr. KJ.
Hello and welcome to the KJ Show with me, Dr. Katherine Johnson, on my new YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk about something that's been happening a lot in the news, topsy-turvy energy policies. Ever since Trump came into office, it seems like the path that we were on towards net zero, green, whatever, Green New Deal has all been upset. And now all the folks that had pledged money in those things are no longer able to make money. Is this a bad thing? I don't think so. And maybe that's a little surprising, but I love energy, and this is because these energy policies really didn't make any sense. But first, I always like to start with something fun that you cannot make this stuff up. And apparently there's this congressman, Barry Moore, in Alabama, and apparently he has nothing else to do but complain about gas can regulations. Now, we're talking about the regulation of a gas can, you know, the one that you get that has a 5-gallon can that you put in the back of your car in case you run out of gas somewhere. And he doesn't like the new design because the new design apparently is drip proof. And basically, he's a big fan of Trump. Trump actually likes him too. And he says basically he really wants to change the regulations over gas cans, the 5-gallon cans. He said he released a press release championing newly filed legislation outlining the issues he fights for. Fast for gas cans. He says basically before he issued it that he his legislation was Freedom to Fuel Act. We don't have anything else to fight about in Congress. Would exempt gas cans from federal regulations limiting emissions caused by portable fuel containers. Now, the fact that they're actually regulating gas cans is also an interesting approach, because I think there's better things for the federal government to do than regulate a 2 or 5-gallon can of gas that we need in emergencies. So I can see his point, and being a conservative, I can understand that he thinks that these regulations are silly. However, we also don't want people spilling gasoline on themselves and hurting themselves, right? That's all another issue. So he says that commentators on the right don't really like the new gas can manufactured cans that have no drip mechanisms that experts have said help avoid environmental emissions. Now, how many emissions are you going to get from a 5-gallon can of gasoline? It's going to be minuscule. So I can again understand his fight for fast fuel, and it's a protest more against needless regulations. Gas can regulation has also been targeted a lot by the right. I guess we have no better things to do. And then Trump is actually making the Environmental Protection Agency declaring that they would make gas cans great again. He sent in a letter to manufacturers saying that he wants to basically go back to the way it was and not have these new prohibitions. I think it's silly. It's silly to put so much effort into something that is really causing minuscule environmental damage. And why in the world are we regulating these things when we have so many important things to do? Again, this is something you just can't make up. This is what they're fighting for in Congress? Really? Why don't they why don't they fix the shutdown? That to me is a lot more important than gas can regulations. But on a better note, one of my favorite technologies, geothermal heating and cooling, has actually become a network in Framingham, Massachusetts. It's going to double in size during the Trump administration. In full disclosure, I used to be part of the Geothermal Heat Pump Consortium, and I was promoting geothermal heat pumps back in the 90s because it is such a wonderful fuel source. It goes heating, cooling, water heating, but geothermal has always had a lot of challenges because it's frankly more expensive to install. But networks reduce the cost. And so in Framingham, with a government grant, they're actually exploring the possibility of having a network of geothermal systems working together to help promote its energy efficiency, and it's also heating and cooling and water heating. So it's a really great idea. It's the first in the nation network in Framingham, and it's going to double in size. And the U.S. Department of Energy approved an $8.6 million grant to help it. Now, gas and electric customers at Eversource completed the first phase, back in 2024. And part of one of the co-funders and the leaders is a low-income group. So what they're doing is they're installing geothermal heat pumps through networks to targeting low-income homes. That to me actually is really great news. And it's something like finally somebody's doing something that makes sense, and it's going to help reduce income eligible customers their bills. This is so much better of approach than going into electrification and forcing them to go all electric. This actually works. The geothermal networks are considered the most efficient way to heat and cool buildings, and the federal money will allow Eversource to add 140 new customers to the Framingham network and fund research to monitor it performance, which sounds great. They first started funding it in December 24, but the contract between Heat and the Department of Energy wasn't finalized until September 30th, and it was just announced Wednesday. So it basically is going to help benefit it's going to claw back billions of dollars to fund other clean energy and actually help include hundreds of millions of dollars in Massachusetts. So Trump isn't against energy efficiency or against green energy. He just wants to have green energy that works, that makes sense. Geothermal heat networks do. This award is an opportunity to clearly demonstrate that and then quantify growth potential of a geothermal network policy. I totally agree. I'm so glad that they're finally giving money to proven technologies, and the network is such a great idea. So I'm really pleased. The system will provide heating and cooling to 140 residential and commercial customers in a Boston suburb, and it taps the low thermal energy from the earth. It's considered solar, really, but because they didn't design it correctly when they were first launching it back in the 90s, they didn't get all the solar money. But it's really a wonderful technology. I've been a big fan of it for years and years. And I'm just so glad that they are finally deciding to put money on technologies and to invest in technologies that are going to help citizens lower their bills, reduce their energy costs, and provide them increased comfort, because geothermal heat pumps are really, really good. Plus, they last years and years and years. So finally, we've got it right. So this is sort of a flip. This is breaking news that I can't even believe is happening, and I'm so pleased it is. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson. You're watching the KJ Show with me, Dr. Katherine Johnson, KJ, and I'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Hello, and welcome back to the KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, on my new YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, I'm talking about the topsy-turvy energy policies that have really kind of upended the green energy industry during the Trump administration. Now, some people may think that's a bad thing. Some others, like me, think it's probably a good thing to start investing in technologies that work, like geothermal networks. But another part of the equation of climate change that doesn't really get fit into any of the models is the fact that climate change doesn't really take into account the fact that Earth, nature, adapts on its own. And also, as human beings evolve and societies evolve, we have better economic development. So we're actually lifting people out of poverty. These are the sort of benefits that they don't really attribute to improve climate change, or they think, in fact, they really want to say the other side that climate change is bad and it's causing all these terrible things, when in fact it actually could be beneficial. This is a very controversial topic, and it was written by this man, Roger Pritzker Jr., who basically has a Substack, and he's very knowledgeable. He's a former professor at University of Colorado or Colorado University, whatever. But so, but he basically takes issue with the fact that the way that in which scientists have framed the climate change argument, because they're dismissing facts to kind of come up with their own ideas. So he basically says, and this is from a article that he's writing, that adaptation is often framed as marginally important to addressing climate change and is really difficult and technical and not effective. He's wrong. They're wrong. He's right. They combine theoretical and empirical analyses show that adaptation, especially via economic development, is often the dominant driver of things that they think are caused by climate-sensitive societal outcomes, especially as we get into different types of environments. This aligns with the adaptation in markets and governments. Basically, what he's saying is that climate change can actually lead to economic development, can lead to drivers, and can increase yields. I think I have a graph on that. They show that they're kind of only looking at one part of the equation. The bad part, what they're not looking at is if climate change is happening, well, guess what's happening? I know this is hard to read, but over the last century, less people are living in poverty, less people are dying, education rates have increased, literacy has increased, child mortality has decreased, democracy has increased. So how is this bad? It's because we're using the fossil fuels to create societies that actually benefit human beings and increase our overall economic output. This is an argument that climate scientists don't want to hear. They don't want to hear that climate change may actually be good for the environment or good for the country or good for the people, because it flies in the face of what they're saying. Climate change is bad. It's happening. We're going to all die in 10 years or 20 years or 40 years or whatever number they're picking. So the cornerstone of his argument is that over time, human beings, societies have evolved to have better economic outcomes, better things are happening. The world is actually a better place to live than it was 100 years ago. We still have things like COVID, which was similar to the Spanish flu 100 years ago, but we have so many other things that are so much better. We don't have dirty horses in the, nobody ever worried about climate change when you're working out horses. Horses, not exactly the cleanest form of transportation either. Well, we've moved to cars, and now we've moved to hybrid cars and even cleaner cars and cleaner technologies. So the climate change scientists haven't given much consideration to the fact that economic policies have evolved and in such have uplifted humanity. There's another chart too on this. They also have found that they used to be really worried about how many greenhouse gas emissions are out there. Well, it turns out they're not nearly as bad as we thought, and that there's only really one or two bad greenhouse gas emissions. That's carbon dioxide, right? And that's less than 4% of the in the atmosphere. It's less than 4%. So this is actually something that shows how the crop yields have actually increased. We're getting more food out of the same land through better technologies over the years. And this is it's hard to argue with these things. It's hard to say that climate change is bad if it's leading to increased crop production, right? More people are being fed, less people are starving. That sounds like a good thing to me. I don't know why they ignore it conveniently in all of their papers. That's fine. Adaptation is also framed as that's not really important according to economics. They think that, oh, that's just something that, is really, marginally important and really difficult. Well, it's not. The alignment basically says that they they have a pessimistic view, that they're basically inverting reality. They also show that the range of plausible greenhouse gas emission scenarios has narrowed. They used to think there was a lot of really bad greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I think I have another chart that basically highlights that there really aren't that many, and that it is um, that carbon dioxide is a minuscule part of the overall atmosphere in the environment, in our environment. So we have had all this effort and all this money and all this consternation because we think that the world is getting warmer. Well, we had a little ice age and then we had the Renaissance. Maybe it's okay that the world is getting warmer. Climate policy largely focuses on mitigation. The UN Framework Convention and UN Convention governs the annual Conference of Parties, COP, that I've talked about before. And they basically have now started to say that their definition of climate change includes both natural and anthropogenic, us, human-caused activities. But the stated objection is to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. However, it already is stabilized. Global mitigation of efforts have persistently fallen short no matter how much money we throw at the problem. They haven't really achieved their goals. And they're really only looking at one side of the question. Recent studies have shown that with the evolution of solar and wind and batteries and EVs, others have estimated that crop yields are better than ever. Poverty is being decreased, affluence is increasing, and natural disaster damage is also decreased. Saying that to blame climate change as the cause of all things and that we're causing it is scientifically unproven. And it's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. And that was what the article says. The contributors of this article also pointed out that the narratives that climate scientists push for inverts reality. It isn't based on anything other than politics and cherry picking data. And that to me is why I get really annoyed when my friends in the industry say, "Oh, we're responsible for all these terrible things." No, and actually, if the world gets a little warmer, it's better for some of us. Certainly, poor people. We can grow more food. We can increase our standard of living. We can get rid of diseases. These are things we should be focusing on. So this is a story that's not told. And it's part of our Topsy-Turvy topics. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host. You're watching the KJ Show with me on my new YouTube channel. And thank you for tuning in. I'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hello and welcome back to the KJ Show. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson with my new show on YouTube. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, I am talking about topsy-turvy energy policies. And the Trump administration and the Department of Energy, Chris Wright, who used to be a utility executive, is really upsetting the apple cart in terms of green energy. U.S. has now decided to do a complete U-turn on coal. It began when TVA, the light nation's largest utility and funded and managed by the United States, TVA was built during the Depression, decided not to close their two coal-fired plants because they knew that they didn't have enough alternative energy sources to make the electricity that these folks need. Part of this happened is because Trump basically replaced the board with TVA executives and board members who would agree with his policies. So Trump fired enough Biden-era TVA board members to freeze decision-making. This is according to them. The bad, us, were evil. But now this is the U.S. largest public utility says it doesn't want to close its two coal-fired plants because they don't have any other sources of energy. In the new filings, the TVA signaled that it wants to ditch closure of its Kingston fossil plant and Cumberland fossil plant, which would require further action. The new plan would include introducing natural gas-fired plants at both locations. They had intended to shut them down, saying that they needed to replace the plants by 2035, and they had agreed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions per climate change concerns. But now they're like, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Instead, they're rethinking the closures because of regulatory changes, topsy-turvy policies, and increasing demand for electricity. Absolutely. We can't do it with solar and wind. I'm sorry. We just can't alone. As the power demand grows, TVA is looking at every available option to bolster our generating fleet to continue provide affordable, reliable electricity to 10 million customers. And that's where the issue is, affordability. When you start relying on solar and wind, it costs more per kilowatt hour than, say, a kilowatt hour generated from a fossil fuel plant like coal or natural gas. They actually also want to help communities thrive. Now, if we think about where TVA is located in, it was a work project started by Franklin Roosevelt in some of the poorest parts of America. So these communities didn't have proper electricity until Roosevelt made them build a TVA. These are people that were basically part of the Appalachian community. They were poor, they were marginalized in society. So Roosevelt created this big, huge utility that bolstered people out of the Depression, gave them jobs, and also built this really powerful power plant providing electricity to folks who'd never had it before. It was it was mind-boggling and fundamentally changed the geographic and economic landscape. It also created some really beautiful dams in these rivers in these lakes that I've been in. It's just fabulous. So the Senate has confirmed 4 of Trump's nominees for TVA, and they're also going to meet in Kentucky too. The TVA has already faced criticism of planning to open up more natural gas plants as the utility was winding down from its fleet of coal plants, but that's because the environmentalists got concerned. Rather, they say that they are wanting to move into coal and natural fired gas, and also they'll look at solar and other renewables too. So it's not a complete lockout of other types of energy. It's just the realization, go ahead. It's just the realization that all of a sudden we don't have enough power. We do not have enough electricity. Our grid can't handle it anyway. This is a picture of the TVA in Tennessee. Actually, TVA provides electricity to about 4 or 5 states in the South. Again, historically, some of the poorest regions in our country, which means that this was a great work project for the Depression, but it also created a whole new industry and created communities. So I think we have another picture of TVA. They're very big. This is one of their other plants, and they're not going to shut this coal plant down because guess what? Data centers are moving into TVA's territory too. And if they don't have enough electricity to supply current need, how are they going to ever have enough electricity to supply the increased need of data centers, which not only use a lot of electricity, they also use a lot of water. So, but TVA isn't the only person or only utility that is doing a second look and thinking that maybe we don't want to do coal anymore. Consumers Energy plans in Michigan plans to invest $17 billion in capital spending in the next 5 years for what? Coal plants. They basically said that Consumers Energy, which is Michigan's second largest investor-owned utility, wants to put $17 billion in generation, distribution, and other assets over the next 5 years because they need it. They need the infrastructure to expand to meet the increased demand. Kind of a no-brainer, really. The utility is expecting robust and sustained load growth in the coming years, and it projects that the current normalized load growth of 2 to 3% that's going to continue, they don't have enough capacity. So they're going to have to do something to get more energy. But they're not looking at renewables. They're looking at coal because it's reliable. So what they decided is the utility announced an agreement that the data center is going to actually use a form of coal, and they're actually now requiring the data centers to pay for their own power, which is a great idea. And another investor noticed that it was that they're increasing these commitments because there are more data centers on tap to be coming into Michigan. So here's a way they're investing in their infrastructure. They're making sure that the data centers pay their own way, so to speak, and that other customers are not deprived of their electricity in honor of bits and bytes to help the AI data world. The United States Department of Energy has also announced a big plan to reinvigorate and expand America's coal industry. I've talked about this in previous shows, but the United States is going to invest $625 million to expand and reinvigorate the coal industry, aiming to boost energy production and support communities nationwide. Not only does this create jobs, it also creates another source of reliable power. Beautiful clean coal, this is what Chris Wright says, the Secretary of Energy, is essential to powering America's reindustrialization and winning the AI race. The funds will help keep our nation's coal plants operating and will be vital to keeping electricity prices low and the lights on without interruptions. They have also committed so far $625 million now, and they actually have they're doing $350 million for coal recommissioning and retrofit. So it's not going to be dirty coal. It's going to actually be clean coal. There's also going to be $775 million for rural capacity investments. So they're investing in areas where coal is dug and mined, and those don't generally tend to be wealthy communities to begin with. So the Trump administration is redirecting funds, taking money away from the green energy deal that benefited upper class citizens, and they're focusing on reliable energy that's going to benefit lower income and frankly all Americans. So yes, it's topsy-turvy, but I think it's finally turning in the right direction. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson. You're watching the KJ Show with me, and I'll be right back.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk. Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Hello, and welcome back to the KJ Show with me, Dr. Katherine Johnson, on my new YouTube channel. And this part of the show, I always like to talk about things that I would like to talk with guests, but we don't have that capability quite yet. We will in future, I promise. One of the things that struck my mind is I came across this article in LinkedIn talking about this Serbian mathematician, uh, Milovic, I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say this. Milakovic, who actually formulated a theory about climate change and that it's naturally occurring climate change over thousands and thousands of years. And he went back in time and used meteorological equations to prove that climate change is not caused only by human beings. It's actually caused by changes in the Earth's rotation, its orbiting, and the fact that it tilts sometimes. And so what this is called is he was an Austrian, he was Serbian, and he went and lived in Vienna, and he took up a professorship in mathematics, but he was really, really, truly intrigued with um, uh, meteorology. So he sought to apply his mathematical skills in areas that hadn't been studied. He wanted to find a way we understand all these changes in the Earth's atmosphere and cultivate mathematical tools, and he wanted to look at it in a new way. So he calculated his goal. We can put up his principles here. His goal was to calculate. Oh no, this was I put these in the wrong place. So you can take those two down, and there's another one with the circular orbit thing. There we go. So here are his cycles. He postulated that the Earth changes its rotation, its angle, and its rotation to the sun. It's orbiting. So basically, the Earth over time changes its overall orientation, and that in fact leads to climate change. And they're at different intervals. They're the so they're 20, one's 26,000, one's 40,000 approximately, and one's 100,000 years. And he predicted that these changes occur as part of the Earth's natural rotation. So if this is true, then nothing we can do about climate change, because we don't control the Earth's atmosphere, nor do we control the Earth's rotation. And it's really kind of amazing that this man in the 1800s, early 1900s, came up with a theory that first was disproved and then actually turned out to be correct. So in 24, he had a couple different collaborations where he came up with all these different really complicated mathematical calculations. And these were, done without computers. And he was doing very complicated math, and he's had them published in a couple different journals, one's in French and one's in German, that he extended his longhand calculations hundreds of thousands of years into the past to assess the effect of known regular changes of these three astronomical parameters: the tilt of the Earth, or obliquity, the tilt of the Earth's axis of Earth's rotation, the wobble-like movement of the Earth's rotation, and the eccentricity, or basically the elliptical shape around the Earth. And so he was able to calculate when these occur and how these occur. And these three parameters govern the amount of solar radiation that's beamed into the Earth. And that basically creates different seasons and different events. So what he was able to do is, because they're on different time scales, he was actually able to predict that these events happen thousands of years in the past and will likely happen thousands of years in the future too, but they're not caused by man. He worked tirelessly to construct this tradition radiation curves at different degrees of the Earth, 55, 60, and 65 north, which were deemed the most important because they were worried about glaciers melting back then in the 1900s. In 1924, he wrote about this, and they selected these latitudes to actually prove. And both sets of the calculations were contained within his masterwork that he published in 1941. Now, what most scientists at the time thought he was crazy. They thought, nah, this isn't true, and that his predicted temperature changes were too minor to choreograph the advance and retreat of glaciers. Until the 70s, when they actually found out, get what? His stuff was right. He was right. He predicted then, more important, several European glacier deposits didn't seem to back up his assumptions, but then that was later proven to be false. And so what really happened is his work was vindicated in the 1970s with high resolution of deep sea cores that confirm the glacial periods that he had talked about. And they follow precisely his predictions of changes in the Earth's rotation that contribute to changes in the Earth's temperature. Those studies provided enough evidence for cyclical climate change in the past, with approximately 10,000, 100,000, 41,000, and 23 years, thousand years. He said one of the changes costed 100,000 years. One of the changes happens every 41,000 years. One of them happens every 23,000 years. And looking back, they proved him correctly. So the astronomical cycles in eccentricity, axial tilt, and precision, respectively, were proven to be correct. And so these are now known as the Milanovich cycles. This is interesting to me because this science has now been proven. It was discredited earlier on when it first came out. But here we have a professor who is a mathematical genius, has to be, right? And he basically came up with a theory that climate change is caused by changes in the Earth's orbit and rotation, and its axis tilting on its axis, which has nothing to do with us. The interesting thing is he was vindicated in the 1970s, but I wonder why that's about the time Earth Day started. That's about the time we started worrying about climate change in the 1970s, and we eventually got to global warming and global heating. But why was this scientist overlooked from the 1970s on? And how did other scientists sort of hijack the discussion when we had mathematical proof that this man's theories were correct and we could go back in time and measure them and validate them? But because his mathematical theories, which are objective facts, don't align with the climate change political rhetoric that has been used to divert funds from coal plants to green energy solutions that don't work and actually destroy the Earth. EV batteries are really bad. So is solar radiation, so are solar panels. It's interesting to me that this man, whose scientists were vindicated in the 1970s, never was unheard of. Nobody understands, nobody hears about him. Why? Because he isn't popular. It goes against what politics want. So I argue again that there is no such thing as settled science, but this is something that the scientists should re-examine. And where was the UN in all of this? Quiet, crickets. This is why I really love it when science can prove man when we're wrong. And apparently the climate change science is really, really wrong. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson. You're watching The KJ Show with me, Dr. KJ, and I'll be right back.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Hello and welcome back to the KJ Show with me, Dr. Katherine Johnson, on my new YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. And I've been talking about topsy-turvy energy policies, and Trump really has upended the green energy industry entirely. So the next thing that he's done, other than bringing back coal, is he's also supporting the building of nuclear power plants. And we're not talking just about the old ones like Diablo Canyon. We're talking about virtual power plants, very small power plants too. He just actually did one on developed a very small modular reactor that was carried on an aircraft carrier or on a plane that could actually deliver nuclear power to remote regions like Army maneuvers. So some of the major ways is, and I'm going to be at a conference next week, so I'm sure I'll be hearing plenty of bemoaning and gnashing of teeth about the fact that Trump's basically upending the green energy industry. On his first day in office, he declared an energy emergency. If we remember, the energy prices were pretty high. And as part of his effort to jumpstart production from energy sources, he supported something called nuclear. He also increased drilling in Alaska, which has made environmentalists mad too. But the Interior Department dramatically cut down the timelines required for environmental reviews of fossil fuel and mining projects, which hence supporting coal. It's also changed the limits on what people think planet warming gases like oil and gas drilling. But he's also produced a massive expansion of offshore oil and drilling and gas drilling off the coasts of California and Florida. And they also want to start exporting more U.S. natural gas. The administration hopes to quadruple the nation's nuclear production too. As part of this effort, he's directed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to basically accelerate the timeline for nuclear plants and to make it a little more fast. This is a picture, there's another picture too of another nuclear power plant. I think it's the Vogtle plant that took way too long and went overrun. It was like 4 or 5 years over to schedule due to all the federal regulation required to get it up and running on land, on time. He wants to say, we want nuclear energy to be safe. Of course we do. We always do. But the regulations are excessive. And one of the reasons the regulations were excessive is because the bureaucrats who were running these agencies really didn't want to support nuclear energy. And they used this as a way to gum up the works, so to speak. Bureaucrats are good at that. So what Trump wants to do is increase energy production by expanding oil and gas drilling, boosting coal production, as I spoke earlier, which creates economic growth, which goes back to my second segment, which talks about how if you accelerate economic growth, it improves the standard of living for everyone, right? Create job, more income, less sickness. Good things happen when economies grow. Lower energy prices, especially, and job creation, particularly in the fossil fuel market. There have, of course, been also rollbacks of environmental regulations, streamlining of projects, a reduction in compliance costs, and the goal is to achieve energy independence. All of these policies are aimed at increasing the energy infrastructure to prepare for the brave new world of AI. And these changes are part of broader strategy related to get rid of this push of all in on renewables, and maybe stuff that we should be doing is the all in approach. I think we need to have everything: solar, wind, renewables, nuclear, coal, natural gas. We need it all because America is growing and we have data centers and we don't have the infrastructure in place. So by 2025, an estimated $35 billion worth of new renewable energy projects have been canceled. And of course, that's upsetting to the people who made a lot of money on those things. But a lot of those projects that were supporting solar and wind energy were companies that couldn't support themselves. And we had the Solyndra disaster and we had the EV bus disaster. We've had a lot of investments in technologies, frankly, just don't work. They sound good, but they really don't work. And they're not even environmentally good. The shift indicates the changing landscape for developers, and the federal policy creates an environment less favorable for clean energy projects. I like the way this is written in this article. Clearly, they're not in favor of these things. It basically says that the new Trump policies aren't going to support projects that are not economically sensible. We've had to have solar rebates and solar and wind rebates in order to make it even close to being economically viable in most states. They can't support by itself. Rather, I like to see the fact that we are now shifting to technologies that we know work. Geothermal heat pumps work. really, really well. And they're environmentally friendly, and they're basically taking the heat from the 5 feet below the Earth's surface and circulating it through pipes and a network that heating and cooling, depending on if it's winter or summer. But this is a proven technology that's been around for 100 years, and it didn't get a lot of support from the federal government until recently. There are technologies that are clean and green, but don't require this massive levels of production and don't require this massive level of investments. There's also a shift in climate mandates. We're again away from the net zero policy that I don't believe any American ever voted on, and the major policy, of course, to get rid of the EV mandates for the tailpipe emissions. This is another big win because these mandates to make everybody have an EV car, not a hybrid, which I just bought, but EV car. EV cars are more expensive to operate, to buy. They have more expensive to build, and they price a lot of people out of the market. Plus, there is no secondhand used car market for EVs because once their battery's gone, they're gone. And that battery takes a lot of environmental damage. They're employing children in Africa to mine the cobalt and the lithium. So I don't know why anyone ever thought this was a good idea. It isn't a good idea. Go ahead and put up the last picture. So this is the new way of nuclear energy. It's where it's going. And it's also going to bolster, this is just another example of how they're changing the world of nuclear energy. It's an odd looking picture, I know, but you can take it down. So while the policy shift is supposed to bolster traditional energy system, it also raises concerns among the green folks. Like, well, what does that mean about our subsidized car battery factories? Well, people aren't buying EVs. They're buying hybrids. They're not buying EVs. So Ford decided to get out of the EV business and go back to something that makes more sense. Ram trucks that are real powered gas trucks that can actually do the job that Ram trucks are supposed to do. Haul. EV trucks can't do that. So the shift also could impact battery storage advancements, though I doubt it, because I think we're going to need to support battery storage regardless of the technology, just because we need everything. Industry leaders are now evaluating the long-term impact of these regulatory moves. Well, they should be. If they're a good businessman, the regulatory environment has changed. But what's really changed isn't the world isn't getting worse. It's the world is getting corrected. The environmental demand is we are investing in technologies that work. We're investing in technologies that lead to higher levels of affordability, increased standards of living, things that they certainly needed in TVA with Roosevelt in the 1940s and the Depression. So all energy policies aren't bad, just some that have been sort of hijacked by a group of people who believe that climate change is absolutely happening, but they're not mainstream. And finally, we have a little bit of common sense. I'm not saying everything Trump does is right, but as a person who's been in the industry long enough, I'm really pleased to see that we're finally investing in technologies like geothermal heat pumps that work, as opposed to solar PV panels that aren't as effective as they're supposed to be. I'm Dr. Catherine Johnson. You're watching the KJ Show with me and my new YouTube channel. I'll be right back.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation.
And welcome back to the KJ Show. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson, your host, and today I've been talking about topsy-turvy energy policies. But since it was President's Day on Monday, I wanted to honor two of our actually probably some of the best presidents we've had, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. They both have made a mark on the United States, and frankly, they don't necessarily get the press that they should have. George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were very different backgrounds, but they both made profound and lasting changes in our United States that has spilled over even 100 years later. They were early experiences in their military roles, and their political careers were different, but they also were informative to their personalities and helped them decide how to govern. Washington was born in 1732 on February 22nd. His family had a plantation and it was modest fortune. Abraham Lincoln was born in abject poverty on February 12th. Hence, we have President's Weekend to celebrate both of their birthdays. In a log cabin, his family was poor and he grew up in a frontier environment. Washington's father died, I don't know if you were aware, when he was 11, meaning George Washington had to sort of become the man of the family at a very young age. Lincoln's mother died when she was 9, and his father remarried a stepmother who actually encouraged him to get an education. Abraham Lincoln was illiterate pretty much until his stepmother came along. Washington also was not particularly well educated. He was skilled in mathematics and surveying, so he became a successful surveyor at 16. Lincoln had less than a year of formal schooling, self-taught, but he read everything he could. And the thing about Abraham Lincoln is we now understand the extent of his brilliance. If you've ever read his speeches or his comments or his interesting things he said, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was also a very, very good railroad attorney, which in those days, if you're a railroad attorney, that's like you're the best attorney on Wall Street. You're helping the railroads be successful. They don't let so a lot of his poor, aw shucks, frontiersman persona isn't really accurate. Once he became a lawyer, he became a very, very good lawyer. And the railroads only hired the best. Washington started his career with the Virginia militia and became a lieutenant colonel. Thank goodness he ended up commanding our troops. And then during the French and Indian War, he gained a lot more experience and had a reputation for bravery. I didn't know this, but Lincoln served briefly in the Black Hawk War as 1832, and he was such a good leader, his troops elected him a captain. Washington was appointed commander-in-chief, and Lincoln was limited, but obviously he had a lot of experience during the Civil War. Washington when he was first elected, opted not to have like a perennial presidency. He opted to step aside after 2 terms, which set the precedent. And Lincoln, unfortunately, was assassinated just after he got reelected the second time. But the thing about them that makes them so important and why we need to remember them is Washington really was the father of our country, and Lincoln was the great emancipator. So politics aside, both of these men really did help shape our union, and we're better off because of both of them. Washington was a brilliant man. He was also a gentleman, and he also had the good sense, knew when to step aside. Lincoln was a really interesting man, very brilliant, and thank goodness we had him because he wanted to restore, and Gettysburg Address is one of the most beautiful speeches I've ever read. Thank you to both of them for serving our country and for being such good leaders, and we need to look up to these men. They are a part of our history, and we should be very proud that they were our leaders. I'm Dr. Katherine Johnson. You're watching the KJ Show with me on my new YouTube channel. No show next week because I'll be out of town, but I'll be back in 2 weeks with a lot more fun, interesting news. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
This has been The KJ Show. Tune in next week as Katherine shares her insights to current changes in the energy industry while drawing on her experience as an energy efficiency consultant for the past 30 years, right here on The KJ Show.